Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my co-host and dear friend, Jacob Acquire. And one of our favorite Panthers players ever was on First Take this morning and had some interesting words to say. I think Stephen A. Smith kind of posed the question, would you rather have your MVP or a Super Bowl ring? And Cam Newton responded, MVP. And
what?
It blew several people's minds today on Twitter. Not going to name names, but my question to you is, Jacob, what are your initial thoughts on this? We haven't discussed about this prior to recording because we wanted those raw initial takes, and I'm curious as to yours.
My take on the subject matter is I agree with Cam. I actually really resonate with what he's saying. And the way he tried to explain it was from an impact perspective, right? He brought up Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson, I would say, is probably one of the 3 or 4 most influential NBA players of all time. Is he as good as Michael Jordan was? No. Is he as good as LeBron James was? No. But I think he was more influential than LeBron James is. And while he doesn't have a title to his name, he has the MVP. He has like his aura about him. He introduced kind of individuality to players, let them express themselves more on the court. And that's a huge legacy that he was able to impart on the league that we still see today. Like before him, you aren't going to see a lot of players with tattoo sleeves and stuff if Allen Iverson isn't as big as he is. And from the Cam perspective of it, I think what he did in terms of an entertainer, the kind of culture he instilled not only in Carolina but around the league. He had 92-year-old grandmas dabbing, right? He had Betty White dabbing in commercials and stuff like that. He brought the Migos and Future to Bank of America Stadium. We haven't had anything like that since then, even though our owner does like to say he brings music to the Carolinas. We haven't really had that kind of culture, and Cam really instilled that around the league. And while Michael Vick was the main first big dual threat QB, I think Cam's archetype is something that we see translated to today. Do we really see a team take a chance on a Josh Allen if Cam Newton wasn't as popular as he was? Do we really see a team like Jalen Hurts employ the tush push if Cam wasn't as popular as he was? Or guys like Justin Fields getting drafted, I think he was 11th overall. Or players wearing the number 1 like Kyler, like Justin Fields. I can't put it in my mind right now. Jalen Hurts is he's not number 1, is he?
Yeah, he's number 1.
There you go. So like he had the impact on the sport. Obviously the ring is the ultimate goal, but when it's a team kind of sport, a Super Bowl win is a team achievement, right? That like when we try to use rings and stuff as arguments, like for Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes, we really have to realize that the rest of the team got them there. And the thing I would pose back to you to kind of end my point is, would you rather be Allen Iverson with the MVP and have his legacy, or Robert Horry? Robert Horry has 7 NBA championships with the Lakers and the Spurs. Would you rather be him or Allen Iverson?
There's some interesting dynamics that you're posing with that question. And I think it goes back to the exact point that you brought up with Allen Iverson. He is one of those people in NBA history that you would say impacted the game, potentially even changed the game. He's Allen Iverson, Steph Curry. Steph Curry obviously has the championships, but those are the kind of guys where they impacted the game from that way. And in that regards, it's going to be super, super special when we talk about them looking backwards. They aren't going to be, I think, in the Michael Jordan, the LeBron James, the Kobe Bryant arguments, because they don't have the MVPs, they don't have the titles, and those conversations are reserved for the GOATs. And at no point is Cam Newton saying he's Joe Montana, he's Tom Brady, he's Patrick Mahomes. He's simply being asked, if you could be given a Super Bowl ring or keep your MVP, which one are you taking? And he's taking that personal accolade because he thinks it personally represents what he did in 2015. And so what I'm going to pose as another illustration is you go back to the 2013 Seattle Seahawks, the only year Russell Wilson has a championship ring. And I think a lot of people would say that was a team win. How much of that was because of Russell Wilson? And we saw when the defense got disbanded, they never really got to those heights again. And he's never, ever received a MVP vote in his entire career and probably never will. So when you have those kind of accolades to back it up, I think it helps with Hall of Fame arguments and kind of tier ranking, because these are the conversations I think when we talk about Eli Manning, Big Ben, and Philip Rivers. Who's better than all of them? Both Eli and Big Ben have 2 rings. Philip Rivers obviously doesn't have any rings, but none of them have MVPs. None of them were the best player in a given year. And I think that speaks volumes. So regardless of what side of the fence you're on, 2015 was a very special year. Cam Newton deserved the MVP. And it's just unfortunate that it kind of crumbled there at the end and they weren't able to pull off the victory in the Super Bowl. But again, like you said, it's a team sport. One person is not necessarily the difference maker unless you are a Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes and you have earned kind of that GOAT status.
I mean, even Tom Brady had top 10 defenses in all his Super Bowl wins. So it is a team effort. And to your point about Russ in the 2013 Super Bowl, you asked how important was Russell Wilson? What impact did he have? We saw it in that Super Bowl. He didn't win Super Bowl MVP. They gave it to a linebacker. And if you ask like 100 people in the street, do you remember that Seattle Seahawks versus Broncos Super Bowl? They're probably like, yeah, I remember. It was a blowout, right? And you say, who won MVP of that game? Do you think they're going to know it was Malcolm Smith? Probably
I
not.
think I might say like KJ Wright or one of the other
Wright, or even Marshawn Lynch or Richard Sherman. It's not going to be who it really was. So I guess the final point I would bring up is, and when it comes to all-time weighing rings versus weighing MVP awards, 53 plus the practice squad every year get a ring. One person gets the MVP. We don't ever see bums win MVP, but we can see bums win Super Bowl rings. And I think Cam respectfully was trying to say that when he brought up Trent Dilfer and Nick Foles and that kind of thing. He was playing the political part there, but I think that's the point we need to hone in on and focus on. That's why the argument between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson every year over the past couple years, has been so visceral between the fans. They understand that this is like an important thing, that even if neither of them win the Super Bowl, and I think both fan bases kind of accept that as long as Mahomes is like healthy and kicking, it's going to go toward them in the AFC. That MVP is an important thing, and having one of those does wonders for your legacy.
It really does. And when Mahomes and the Chiefs are worried about chasing 3-peats, potential 4-peats, I don't know how long it's going to go. You really need these deciding factors. So when we look back in history, like as much as people, I think, want to tarnish Brett Favre's career because of just kind of how it ended, it unfolded. And it was still during the era when we had Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, some really all-time great quarterbacks. That was a guy that won 3 MVPs, had a Super Bowl on his resume early on in his career. And Lamar Jackson, he has the 3 MVPs. Josh Allen doesn't have any. And that doesn't mean I don't think Josh Allen didn't deserve an MVP between last year or this year. It's just how the cards fell, how the cookie crumbled in that particular instance. And like you said, the fans getting visceral is they understand these are legacy defining moments and awards. So when we talk about them retrospectively, there is something to stand on. And I know as a analyst myself, I appreciate the advanced metrics, but sometimes it's just hard to beat some of these all-time awards, like Lamar Jackson breaking Michael Vick's rushing record. Like that doesn't necessarily capture expected points added or DVOA or one of these advanced metrics of how efficient they might be. But those are things that go down in the record books that almost anybody can recognize and understand. And those are very, very special when we have these conversations.
For sure. Stuff like MVP and all the other awards. We know it's narrative driven. It's about breaking records. That's kind of what gets you there. Like you're saying, that's what we'll remember 10, 20, 50 years down the line are these record breaking moments. And I think this is a good way to pivot into the main topic of today. We don't have a game this upcoming weekend, so we can't preview anything. We could do the Super Bowl, but I think that'd be a bit premature. So today we wanted to look at the season in totality. What were kind of the top 10 historical moments of the 2024 season? What records, so to speak, were broken or were created this year? And I think we have to start. We're going to go like 10-1. We have to start with
before we get into the top 10, because we'll go 10-1, and you're going to get into that. You're good. You're good. What I wanted to bring up was like a couple honorable mentions, bring up a couple examples. So we just talked about Josh Allen. He became the first player this year to have 3 passing touchdowns and 3 rushing touchdowns in a game. And that was a legendary performance out in Los Angeles against the Rams. Very fun to watch. Leonard Williams, the longest pick six. I think it was close to 90 yards.
I think it was 92 yards.
Yeah, and he's a 300-pound lineman. We've never seen that before. So these are some of those like kind of historic events, so to speak. But those are on the cusp. Those are cool things that you'll see pop up on an infographic the next time someone comes close to it or breaks it. So why that's kind of the ballpark we're in. Those are just kind of a couple examples as we get into the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, the Josh Allen one, obviously he willed them to that win, and that was huge. The Leonard Williams one, I don't know what James Harrison weighed in that Super Bowl, but he had like it must have been like a 102-yard one. But either way, pretty crazy. And Leonard Williams was against his old team in the Jets, so a little extra special there. But to get to number 10, and I think this is going to be the only negative record, so to speak, and we had to include it because we are a Panthers podcast. So the 10th most impressive or most important historical moment of this season is your Carolina Panthers defense allowed a league record 534 points. That's over 31 points per game. If you're keeping score at home, that means you got to score 4 touchdowns and get 4 2-point conversions to break even based on what the Panthers defense gives up. And they gave up over 3,000 rushing yards, which I believe they're the 4th team since the merger, the AFL-NFL merger, to do so. That's over 175 yards rushing per game. So the Panthers defense is historically bad, one for the ages. And I think it's going to be why you're going to hear us talk about defensive linemen and linebackers and stuff. Once we approach the free agency topics, the draft topics, that kind of thing, this is why. And I think all the fans know that, like, it was clear when they watched the team.
It was abysmal, and part of it was injuries, and then part of it was the free agency signings. Like, obviously, you hit on Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis on the offensive side. Adam Thielen has looked the part the past 2 years. You get Jalen Coker as undrafted free agent. So a lot of things went well in the front office when it was addressing the offense. But that defense, like you said, worst in the NFL this year and worst all time from a point standpoint. I think when you look at it from a points per game, there are a few teams that kind of surpass that total. But when you're looking at just aggregate numbers, it's insane to think about just how many points were allowed. Part of that was also the Falcons' performance at the end. I think we allowed they scored like 38 points in that game. So a lot of points there at the end of the year. It's cool that the Panthers doubled their win total, but correcting stuff on the defensive side is going to be huge if the Panthers want to take a step in 2025. So at number 9, in the NFC South. And it's a cool record because it's Mike Evans who tied Jerry's most consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. Jerry Rice did it for 11 straight years at one point in his career. Mike Evans has done it for the first 11 years of his career, becoming the first ever player to do that. Jerry Rice had, I believe, it was a little over 900 yards in his rookie year. So doesn't have the same feat or accomplishment that Mike Evans has claimed to. But I think it'll be very interesting to see if Evans can actually set the record next year. And I think that's why it's at 9 right now. I think if he actually broke Jerry Rice's record, this is something that we're talking about in the top 5 because nobody else has really done this or even come close to sniffing it in more recent years.
Yeah, take that, Jerry Rice. 11 straight to start your career. But this is important because, like we talked about with the MVP argument and stuff like that for the Hall of Fame, you need certain like stats, certain accomplishments. And while Mike Evans's career laid out might not reflect a Hall of Fame receiver, every season having 1,000 yards is a pretty tough argument. And he missed some time this year. I think he missed 3 games there in the middle, and to come back and still end up getting it, I believe it was in week 18 when they're playing the Saints. They end up getting it. It's impressive. You can't deny, even though like they're in our division. I don't want to see him get 1,000 yards as a Panthers fan, but as a fan of football, you got to love it. And it was overall pretty impressive. Another impressive thing in terms of receiving, this is going to be number 8. Brock Bowers, the star rookie tight end, all-pro rookie tight end for the Las Vegas Raiders. he broke Mike Ditka's receiving yardage record, which was 1,076 yards for Ditka. Brock Bowers got over 1,100 yards, almost 1,200 yards, and he did it on almost double the receptions. He
Exactly
actually
double the receptions.
exactly, yeah.
So
Most
it's
receptions for a
crazy.
rookie. He passed Puka, who was the most last year, but 112 receptions, 1,194 yards, and 5 touchdowns. If the Raiders have a better QB, he probably has 10-ish touchdowns, but an incredible season for Bowers, who really smoked all the rookie receiving numbers. But I think it's a bit more impressive that Mike Ditka got over 1,000 yards on 56 catches. He was out there averaging almost 20 yards a catch as a tight end back in the when did he play? Like the it was I think 70s, right? Was when he
Had to
was a
have been.
rookie. 20 yards of reception back then is insane. And it's cool that Bowers passed that mark in totality, but like you're saying, those old time numbers are something special for him.
He was like Rob Gronkowski, Jimmy
Yeah.
Graham, Travis Kelce, like those renditions of tight ends that we've seen in the modern era. That's what he was back in the day. And like you said, to put up over 1,000 yards on 56 catches, have 12 touchdowns, and do it in a 14-game season, and for it to be breaking, that record be broken, I think it would have been broken in a 16-game span for Brock Bowers. I think he just added more to it in week 18. But it's one of those things that it's just mind-blowing that some of these records were not only set so long ago, but set when there was shorter seasons. So these were truly spectacular records that are getting broken. It's very cool to see Brock Bowers do what he did. Malik Neighbors was kind of back and forth with him in the receptions. Both of them passed Puka's record from last year. Brock Bowers kind of came out on top. I think he might have led all rookies with receiving yards. I'd have to check Brian Thomas, but I think Brian Thomas has more receiving touchdowns than Bowers did. So it would be very cool to see kind of like a rookie receiving triple crown between tight ends and wide receivers. And if there's a wide receiver that comes up in the next couple of years that's able to do it, it will be interesting to monitor. But I think moving into number 7, we're kind of step away from the player aspect and actually talk about a coach who is on, I would say, the path to hit a very, very historical number. And that coach is Mike Tomlin. He has the record for most consecutive wins to start a head coaching career. And that current number is at 18. He trails only 2 coaches all time. Bill Belichick with 19 seasons with the Patriots, so he can tie him next year. And then you have to go back to when the Cowboys were really considered America's team before Jerry Jones even bought them, when Tom Landry was the coach. They had 21 consecutive winning seasons. You want to talk about being America's team? Like, that is just being consistently good. I think they had 2 Super Bowl wins over that time, a few more Super Bowl appearances. Tom Landry is one of the best coaches of all time. So when you're getting mentioned with 2 of the greats, I think that's a testament to what Mike Tomlin has done, even if he doesn't have necessarily the playoff success that other coaches do. And I think that's large in part because he doesn't have the quarterback, and you can knock him for it. But given what he's given year after year, he always finds a way to come out on top.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to get they ended up 10-7 or 11-6, I believe, with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. No disrespect to those 2 guys, but you have a guy like Joe Burrow fighting for his life and barely getting 9 wins. So if you're able to do that with guys of that caliber, it's incredibly impressive. Like you said, 21 straight for Tom Landry is impressive. You got to think it's been, I think, 30 years now since they've been to a NFC championship game. So that's like Landry's whole winning season's career, to the point now where the Cowboys really haven't done anything. Had to get some Cowboy hate in there, given that Washington finally got to the championship game, and it's been so long that Dallas.
Let's add to that. Tress Way, the Washington Commanders punter, has more passing yards in the NFC Championship game than Dak Prescott has in his entire career. Okay.
Well, then Dak Prescott, Tony Romo, any Cowboys quarterback before that since would have been 96. So like any Cowboys QB in there, Bledsoe, yeah. None of them have as many passing yards as Tress Way does in an NFC or even in any championship game, because Romo didn't play in the AFC or anything. Bledsoe, he might have had some championship yardage. So we'll have to check that, do some fact checking there. after the episode. Keeping it with Washington, number 6, Jaden Daniels is the 6th rookie to reach the conference championship game. And he helped lead a massive turnaround for Washington this year. They had an +8 win total improvement over what they were last year. Both of us had written them off. I think a lot of people thought that this was not going to be a successful team, but they made it all the way to the NFC Championship. And 8 wins is impressive, like for a turnaround. The Panthers did it back in 2015. We were 7-8-1, ended up going 15-1 the next year. And to Cam Newton's credit, we all know how that one ended at the end of that season. But that's actually tied for, I guess it'd be a 1, 2, 3, tied for the 7th biggest win total improvement. 5 teams had a +9 win total improvement, most recently being the Niners back in 2019. You know, they were like on and off for a couple years when they started with Shanahan because of injuries. And then 2 teams had a 10+ win total improvement, the 99 Colts and the 2008 Miami Dolphins. And I really don't remember that 2008 Dolphins team, but a 10-win jump is quite impressive.
What was his name? Because it wasn't Jake Plummer. It was the other Dolphins. I think it was the guy that was previously with the Jets. I'm gonna have to look into that. I feel like his name starts with Jake.
Not Chad Pennington.
No, I think it was Chad Pennington. I think that might have been the guy. We're gonna have to do some more like research on it, but it was very interesting. The Dolphins in 2007 were very close to being one of the first teams to go 0-16.
Yeah,
it was, I think, ramping down at the end of the year. They beat the Baltimore Ravens at home, and obviously the Baltimore that draft they draft Joe Flacco, get John Harbaugh as their head coach. They make it to the playoffs. They actually made it to the AFC Championship game that year, and then the Patriots, with the Tom Brady injury, that opened a doorway for not only the Dolphins to make it into the playoffs, but I think the Jets snuck in because Brett Favre was their quarterback that year. So a lot of interesting kind of throwbacks, just the teams that have had the most improvement from one year to the next. And it's very cool to see the Commanders be kind of in that conversation. It's very interesting when you consider just how the roster is built. We talked about the offensive line being an issue. Brandon Thorne, a very well-respected offensive and defensive line guru. You can find his work on Twitter. He's got, I think, not only articles, but books written. Has developed some really, really cool metrics. But he thought going into the year, the Commanders had the worst offensive line by advanced metrics that Ben Baldwin puts together from PFF, ESPN, SIS, and does a composite score based on kind of offensive line rankings. They were bottom 10. And yet somehow Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels, with the quick passing offense, taking those 4 or 5 yard chunks, they were able to make it work. And so I think when you add more talent into this, the ceiling's not even been touched by this Commanders offense. And I think that's really special to see. We hadn't seen a rookie quarterback in the championship game without a top 3 defense before. And yet we had Jaden Daniels kind of take the league by storm. I think what they're doing in Washington is extremely special. The fact that they have continuity at the coaching positions, not only on the offensive side, but the defensive side, I think is going to help them transform this team even more moving forward. So I think it was just very fitting to talk about a rookie that has set the league on fire, and we're excited to watch moving forward. At 5. So this is, I think, when we look back at the 2024 season, these are the big things that we're going to take away. And I think when you join a very select group, more select than, in my opinion, than Heisman groups, maybe even MVP groups, because you have one MVP each year. You have a Heisman winner each year, but you don't have some of these record-setting years. And for Saquon Barkley, he becomes the 9th rushing player to go over 2,000 yards. If he had played Week 18, there's a chance he breaks Eric Dickerson's record. But like what we talked about earlier, these guys are doing it in fewer games. What if it had meant as much? And I think the fact that Saquon was able to get over 2,016 games speaks volumes and puts him in a similar category in this era as a Adrian Peterson, a Derrick Henry, and he rightfully deserves that.
Yeah, and imagine if they didn't invent the tush push a couple years ago. He'd be looking at 25 to 30 touchdowns because that's how it works. You know, you hand the ball off to the running back to get it in, but instead the Eagles have developed a cheat code, so to speak. But yeah, he's right up in that era with Adrian Peterson, who has an MVP, with a Derrick Henry. I'm thinking back a little bit further, LaDainian Tomlinson type stuff, Sean Alexander, another MVP.
Yep.
Like these caliber seasons is what Saquon Barkley put forth. And like, it's a shame he doesn't have the touchdowns to match the 2,000 yards, but really incredible season. He could have, I think, if they didn't sit him in so many fourth quarters, I think he could have still broken Eric Dickerson's record
Yeah.
in 16 games. But there's NFL Films does a really good job of capturing, sideline moments during games. And there was one where Nick Sirianni came over to Saquon. I think it was the first time they played the Giants. And he said, hey, you can break the rushing record in today's game if you want. And Saquon's like, no, just play the young guys. And he sat out the whole fourth quarter of that game. So if they really wore the tires down and played him the whole time, I think he could have broken the record. But it's a good thing they didn't wear him down, because he had a phenomenal performance in the championship game. And they're on the way to play the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So hopefully he can continue to add to such a great season.
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about with even Cam Newton at the top with just the MVP discourse, is that like Mike Evans, like there was a urgency like with the team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in that Saints game to get Mike Evans that record. They knew just how important this was for him. And I think similar with Saquon, even though he sat out several fourth quarters leading up to the end of the season, him getting that 2,000 yards was extremely important for that Eagles offense in week 17, and they knew it. So it's very cool to see just not only players, but the teammates around them kind of rallying to help these guys not only get contract incentives, but really break records so that they're a part of that. I think Saquon said part of the reason why he did that, or would have even chased Eric Dickerson's record, was really to be a testament to the offensive line in front of him, to have them pretty much ingrained in just history. And so I think that was a good point by Saquon when he brought that up. But I think not to outdo the 2K yards. There's almost 10 guys in that exclusive club that have reached that precipice. But there's only 6 players that have reached this next accolade that we're going to talk about, and that's the Triple Crown for wide receivers. We have seen in most recent years, I think it was 2021 with Cooper Kupp, get this, and that's leading the league in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. And Jamar Chase did that this year. He had 127 receptions, over 1,700 yards, and 17 touchdowns. He had one of the best seasons I've seen from a wide receiver of the past half decade, and honestly deserves to be in the Offensive Player of the Year conversations. But because the Bengals missed the playoffs and the voting was done at the end of the regular season, I think they're going to lean Saquon, and they should. But for me, when we're talking about historic moments, because the Triple Crown group is so exclusive, that's why I think I have it here at 4 rather than at 5.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I don't want to discredit Saquon by any means, because he was such an integral piece of that Eagles offense. But they had a couple more pieces there that I think they could work with. The Bengals needed every ounce of what Jamar Chase gave them this year. Like we were talking about, if you just look at their numbers, the offense is what was carrying them. That defense was pretty putrid. It led to a coordinator getting fired at the end of the season. But like you're saying, 127 catches, over 1,700 yards, 17 touchdowns. He's averaging over 100 yards and a touchdown a game. That's really impressive. Like the only people in recent memory that are in that air are Justin Jefferson. He's not there with the touchdowns, but I think his career yardage average per game is like 97. Like it's really close there. This is like you're saying, Cooper Kupp had an impressive season like that. Steve Smith, going back a little bit further, Steve Smith, the Panthers, great. But what I really love the most about the Jamar Chase Triple Crown year this year is that he really loaded up on the stats versus the Ravens when they played him. Like he had to make a statement in both times. And I know you were a Jamar Chase fantasy football holder, subscriber, so to speak. And every time you played somebody when they were playing the Ravens, you dominated those weeks. I know that made you pretty happy.
Oh, it made me ecstatic. He was my first round pick in all 4 of my fantasy leagues, and he had me to the moon because of that pick. And there were several weeks that he was able to offset some phenomenal performances against some of the guys that I faced. And hopefully I'll be able to make a trade to get him in redrafts. I guarantee you he's probably going to be a top 3 pick, and I don't know if I'm going to have a top 3 pick in some of the leagues, but we'll see. Fantasy football aside, a guy that is really a video game player. I really think he has put himself in the conversation as the best dual threat quarterback to ever play the game. And I think in less than 2 weeks, like a week and a half, he will become the youngest player to win 3 MVPs, breaking Brett Favre's record. And that's super special for Lamar Jackson. He not only has that to his name, this past year, he breaks Michael Vick's rushing record. Vick was at a little over 6,100 yards, and Lamar Jackson finished the year a little bit under 6,200 yards. So he's going to keep putting space on that statistic. I would not be surprised if Josh Allen surpasses Michael Vick as well, and we see Lamar and Josh Allen kind of go 1-2 in that metric when it's all said and done. What are your thoughts on Lamar Jackson winning his 3rd MVP? And is there anything more that Lamar has to prove that he's a true bona fide quarterback in this league? Because the jokes were incessant after his first MVP. Some people called last year's a little bit phony because of just how good the Ravens team was. But this year, I mean, with Todd Monken and what they did on offense, it's hard to make any excuses now.
He has nothing left to prove, in my opinion. You talk about, it's a narrative thing, the MVP. And I think it will be pretty close between Lamar and Josh Allen when it's said and done, but I think it will go to Lamar, not only because he broke Michael Vick's rushing record, making him probably the greatest rushing QB of all time. I think we can say that now. Even as big Cam fans, I think we can say Lamar's up there. But he did this with the second best passer rating over a season. And I know passer rating is not the end-all, be-all for quarterback statistics, but it's a really good efficiency capture. And the other top 3 seasons are Aaron Rodgers. Prime Rodgers, to me, is the most efficient QB of all time. He had like a 5-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. He wasn't missing anything. And to have a season like that up there from a passing perspective for Lamar and doing the rushing stuff, this is one of the best seasons I think we've seen in quite some time. He certainly deserves the MVP. I know people are going to argue Josh Allen, and he deserves it too, but it's a season where Lamar's doing just a little bit more from a narrative perspective. And to me, there's nothing else for Lamar to prove other than get a better O-line around him, I guess, or something, and get a better defense and go to the Super Bowl and win it, because that's going to be the thing, right? We talked about at the start of the show, ring versus MVPs, but I don't know, 3 MVPs, the youngest to ever do it. It's super impressive. And just like with Peyton Manning, who started his career early, couple MVPs, he didn't win his first Super Bowl till year 9. Maybe we see a career like that for Lamar Jackson, who it takes a while for him to get there. The team around him finally gets built up well enough, and they get over the hump. But his regular season, because we're talking about the regular season, is one for the history books, and I do think it will be capped off with an MVP award. Like you said, I think it's on Saturday of next week, I think is when they do the awards. So a little over a week. I think he'll be taking home some more hardware.
Absolutely. And like you said, it would not surprise me if his career takes like a Peyton Manning deviation. And we've seen John Harbaugh back in 2008 when he took over for the Ravens, couldn't get past the Steelers, couldn't get past the Patriots. And obviously it was a quicker turnaround from 2008 to 2012. But I really do feel like if a couple things break their way in the next couple postseasons, they could go on a run. This doesn't look like the shell-shock Lamar Jackson in the postseason that we've seen earlier in his career. The past 2 years, he's looked poised. Obviously, there have been opportunities that have been left on the field, but to say that he doesn't deserve to be in the NFL at the quarterback position is just, it was a bad take during the draft, and it's only aged worse since then. So props to him. The next 2 are going to be about the team that is on the precipice of greatness. And at number 2, we got to talk about Patrick Mahomes, now in second place in playoff wins all time. We want to talk about narratives. I mean, the only guy Mahomes is chasing from that perspective is Tom Brady. So Patrick Mahomes now has 17 postseason wins in his career. He is chasing Tom Brady, who has 35. That's just a historic mark. This is a guy that's been to 5 of the last 6 Super Bowls. First time that's ever happened, is now put himself in a position for the first three-peat. No other team has gotten to this point where they're at least in the driver's seat of a three-peat. And if the Eagles want to beat the champs, they got to beat the champs. And that is going to be hard to do. Just kind of put in the perspective just how crazy Mahomes' career has been, because I don't think we've ever seen a start like this, where he hops on the scene on 2018, wins the MVP, throws for 50 touchdowns, and then it just from there he's won another MVP, 3 Super Bowls. Like it's just like piling up for him in terms of hardware, and it's crazy to consider because I don't think we've ever seen this.
No, we certainly haven't. Even when Tom Brady had made it to the Super Bowl or to the playoffs year after year, and eventually to the Super Bowl in spurts, right? Because the Patriots dynasty is like kind of 3 different sections, I would say. Patrick Mahomes' numbers in these playoff games far outshine Brady's. If you extrapolate those 17 wins that Mahomes has in the playoffs and stack them against any MVP season the past couple years, Mahomes wins it, right? If we put that in place and say, hey, vote on these 17 games versus this, it goes to Mahomes, and he elevates his game in the playoffs. We just saw it against the Bills this past weekend. This past weekend, I think it was a 95th percentile EPA per play game for him, which is just insane. That like it's one of his top games ever, and it seems like he does this every single year in the playoffs, only for it to be even better in the Super Bowl. I think he's gonna have to be better. I think he has his work cut out for him, but to get to second in playoff wins in, I guess this would be his 8th season because his first season he didn't start. So in 7 years of starting, to have the second most playoff wins ever is just phenomenal. And to your point, like it was Joe Montana, I think he passed for second place. It's like Joe Montana had 16, Mahomes has 17. Now if you double that and add 1, you get to the guy in first place. So he's definitely chasing Tom Brady for he's going to be chasing him for quite some time, but this is incredibly impressive in its own right.
I mean, we're talking about every single year he's been a starter. So now 7 years they've been in the conference championship game. Like this is getting on like LeBron numbers, and LeBron did that in his prime. Tom Brady and the Patriots, they did that in the 2010s. They had a stretch where it was just conference championship after conference championship. Again, these were seasoned veterans that were trying to solidify a GOAT argument, not a start of a career. And that's just, it's mind-blowing when you look at the wins he's had in the postseason when his defense has allowed 29 or more points. He's got more than, like, I think his wins are like more than double than second place. Like, it's mind-boggling.
Well, and think about it like this. He's been the starter for 7 seasons, 17 playoff wins. He's averaging right about 2.5 playoff wins per year in the league. If you're in the first place, if you get a bye week, that's a Super Bowl win getting that far. So it's insane to think about, and it matches up, right? He's won 3 Super Bowls. So it's insane to think about that he's gotten that far, but there is one more accolade, one more record that I think we both think is a bit more impressive than the 17 wins. And that is, and you mentioned it a little bit ago, the Chiefs are about to three-peat, or they're on the cusp of three-peating. They've made their 3rd consecutive Super Bowl, and they've won their last 2. And if they win this one, it'll be the first three-peat. I know the Packers tweeted out, hey, we know something about three-peats, and it was from the Great Depression 105 years ago is what they were talking about. So this will be the first time in the Super Bowl era, if the Chiefs pull it off, that a team wins 3 Super Bowls in a row. It's hard to make a Super Bowl, right? Like, other than the Chiefs, really, and the Patriots, teams don't make it back-to-back Super Bowls. It's very, very hard to do so. And the Chiefs are making it look easy, and there's a good chance that they win their 3rd one this year. It's shocking to think about. We're desensitized to it because that's been the norm over the past 6 or 7 years since Mahomes and Reed teamed up, but it is very incredible to think about.
It's historic. And the Packers you're referencing, they won the first 2 Super Bowls. And before it was the Super Bowls, they won the championship prior to that. So that is their little 3 championship span, but they did not make it back again. I think the only other runs that you can really put on like par with this is like the Bills in the 90s when they went to 4 straight Super Bowls. Obviously 0 wins with that. You have teams like the Cowboys, the Packers we just talked about, Patriots, obviously, that have gone to 2 or more. And it's hard to like maintain this level of consistent excellence. And the Patriot way tried to do it for so long, and they were always on the doorstep. But to actually do it And to be on the precipice of doing it against your old former team, I think this is one of those like legacy defining moments for Andy Reid. Like you want to put yourself in a position where you're ahead of Bill Belichick, you're ahead of Don Shula, you're ahead of these all-time great coaches. This is how you do it. You have to go out and win this game because no one else has done it. You're approaching the all-time wins list. Like this is how you cement yourself as the greatest of all time. So this isn't just for Patrick Mahomes' legacy. I think this is Andy Reid's legacy. And when you look at how this team is constructed and how they go about winning games, it's hard to pick against them because when you need a bucket, Mahomes is that bucket getter. I think he is 17 of 23 on converting in the playoffs, go ahead or game tying situations. And the next closest in terms of conversion rate is Tom Brady with 53%. So you're looking at a disparity of almost 20 percentage points between first and second place. And that's just unheard of. Like this is clutch. This is ice in your veins. Like you look up any of those in terms of definitions in a dictionary, it's going to show Patrick Mahomes, and he's absolutely earned that. And I think he's going to lead the Chiefs to that historic feat here in a couple weeks.
We've talked about NBA comparisons quite a bit in this episode, and I think this is a very apt time to do so again. Clutch, ice in your veins. Makes me think about NBA players. The last three-peat we saw in the NBA was Shaq and Kobe, back from 98 to 2000. The ones before that, obviously, the two Bulls runs. And other than that, we haven't seen that since then. LeBron James, as great as he is, possibly the best player of all time, has never three-peated. He's been to all the finals, right? But he's never three-peated. The Dynasty Warriors, who I think we can say were probably the greatest offensive revolution for a team in a dynasty that we've ever seen. They made it to, what would it be, 5 in a row. They didn't win 3 in a row. So this is truly something special we could see from the Chiefs if they're able to pull it off. And even if they aren't, they make 5 Super Bowls in a 6-year span, which is just bizarre to think about. But I think you're alluding to that they have a good chance. I might have a bit of a different opinion, but we'll have to wait till next week to talk about that. One quick housekeeping thing before we move on to Purrfect Takes. The Senior Bowl practices are going on as we speak, and the Panthers, as they do, meet with a bunch of prospects. And last night, they met with a ton of defensive prospects. That puts a smile on my face because, we need defensive linemen. I talked about it when we talked about giving up 3,000 rushing yards. And some of the guys we met with, Josiah Stewart from Michigan, edge rusher. Pretty good player there, 8.5 sacks this year. Donovan, I'm going to butcher this last name, Izaruakau, with Boston College. He had 16.5 sacks this year. Another good outside linebacker. They met with Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, interior defensive lineman. Really strong, really stout. I believe he had 8.5 sacks, 6.5 sacks, pardon me. Princely Umanmiland, an edge rusher from Ole Miss, 10.5 sacks this year. There's a clear priority with the Panthers so far in the All-Star games, and it's they want to beef up that defensive front. I don't think a lot of these guys are going to be in contention at pick number 8, but a lot of these guys are going to be prime trade back candidates. So if we trade back to 15 and pick up like the 40th pick as well, those are the names that you're going to be wanting to focus on. And you got to love it, right? You got to love them addressing what they need to address.
Absolutely. And obviously it's the Senior Bowl. Some of the top talent isn't going to be there for obvious reasons. I think sometimes the best prospects are juniors coming out and not the seniors. But that's a conversation for a later date. I do like that this is obviously a need for the team and they're addressing it. We saw that there was a need to fix the interior offensive line last year and they got that done. So if you can turn around this year, get the defensive line squared away, I think that will fix a lot of the issues, not only in the run game, but also in the pass game. And like you talked about, this was the worst defense, arguably of all time from a point standpoint last year. It's only up from here. Unless for some reason Evero really is that bad.
Right?
Yeah, don't want to jinx it, probably knock on some wood right now. But I think with that, it's a good time to get in the Purrfect Takes. And it wasn't something that we talked about necessarily today, but it is news related to today. My opinion is because I think Justin Tucker now is a complete scumbag because of the reports that have come out with some of the massage parlors, but because there's a I would say division rival that has shown a lack of care in regards to those situations. I have a feeling that he will be cut from the Baltimore Ravens this offseason and he will sign with the Cleveland Browns. I don't know if it'll be a fully guaranteed contract, but that is my assessment of the Justin Tucker situation. I believe he is no longer a Baltimore Raven because of his off-field conduct. And I wish there was legal action that could be taken. But unfortunately, statute of limitations, it appears that he will miss that. At this point, it's just public humiliation for being a piece of shit.
Yeah, any recourse that can be taken, whether it be from public perspective or legal, you got to hope for here. And I think it's almost ironic that when this kind of stuff happens and these accusations happen, their play on the field seems to nosedive as well. Justin Tucker, historic, probably the best kicker of all time, quite putrid this year. Lamar Jackson might have had another 1 seed if Tucker's able to make some kicks. But on a lighter note, I am going to relate my take to something I just talked about, and that was the Senior Bowl. Last year, I believe it was 6 out of our 7 draft picks came from the 2 All-Star games, the 2 main ones, the Shrine Bowl, which is also this week. Shador Sanders is at that one, so there's some big media presence there. I know Mike Kay with the Charlotte Observer went to a couple Shrine Bowl practices. And the Senior Bowl, 6 of our 7 picks came from there. I think our first round pick will be at the Senior Bowl. I think they might have pulled out already because a lot of the top performers usually do 2 days of practice and then their agents are like, all right, yeah, teams have promised that they're going to take you, shut down. We don't want you getting hurt. Mike Green, the Marshall Edge being among them. But I think our first round pick is going to come from the Senior Bowl because our staff shows a propensity to favor players who perform well in those all-star games. I think they're going to continue to do that. So whether it's an edge rusher, whether it's like a receiver, somebody, or a corner, whether we stay at 8 or trade back, God forbid we trade up. I don't think we will. But I think that first round pick will be making an appearance in Mobile, Alabama this week.
I like it. And with that, we are all wrapped up. I thought we would have been done in about 30 minutes, and yet somehow we keep pushing the 50-minute hour mark. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. You can find us on Twitter. We're going to start trying to post some more now that we're in the off season. We can talk about the draft more. Catch us next Tuesday when we go over the top 10 Super Bowl moments. A good little ramp up, kind of a review today of what was, I think, important moving forward from the 2024 season. And then looking back and seeing memorable moments heading into the last game of the 2024 NFL season. So we will catch you all next Tuesday to get more into that.